Hello, 8th grade, and welcome to another edition of Johnny Tremain. This is the beginning of Chapter 6, Salt Water Tea. I'm sure you all know what is about to happen. Before we begin Chapter 6, Part 1, allow me, as always, to ask you some questions about the part and get you to focus in on the important details. Starting with number 1, speaking of details, what is the setting of Part 1? There's a slight change from what we've been reading. Number 2, what is the Observers Club? And who are its notable members? 3, how are the members informed of their secret meetings? And 4, what is the subject of this next urgent meeting? So we begin Chapter 6 of Johnny Tremain, titled Salt Water Tea. This is Part 1. On Sundays, the boys might relax a little, breakfast when they pleased, only they must turn up clean and shining in time to go to church with Aunt and Uncle and listen to the inflammatory Reverend Sam Cooper. Dr. Cooper was putting more politics than gospel into his sermons that fall, and more fear of, quote, taxation without representation, end quote, than God into his congregation. England had, by the fall of 1773, gone far in adjusting the grievances of her American colonies, but she insisted upon a small tax on tea. Little money would be collected by this tax. It worked no hardship on the people's pocketbooks, only 3 pence the pound. The stubborn colonists, who were insisting they would not be taxed unless they could vote for the men who taxed them, would hardly realize that the tax had been paid by the East India Company in London before the tea was shipped over there. After all, thought Parliament, the Americans were yokels and farmers, not political thinkers. And the East India tea, even after that tax was paid, would be better and cheaper than any the Americans ever had. Weren't the Americans, after all, human beings? Wouldn't they care more for their pocketbooks than their principles? Shivering, for the last week in November, was bitterly cold. Johnny built up the fire in the attic. From the back window he could see that the roofs of the Afric Queen were white with frost. A sharp rat-tat on the shop door below woke Rab. "What time is it?" he grumbled, as people do who think they are disturbed too early Sunday morning. 7 and past. I'll go see what's up." It was Sam Adams himself. When either cold or excited, his palsy increased. His head and hands were shaking, but his strong, seamed face, which always looked cheerful, today looked radiant. Sam Adams was so pleased that Johnny, a little naively, thought he must have word that Parliament had backed down again. The expected tea ships had not sailed. "Look you, Johnny, I know it's Lord's Day, but there's a placard I must have printed and posted secretly tonight. The Sons of Liberty will take care of the posting, but Mr. Lorne must see to the printing. Could you run across and ask him to step over? And Rab." "Where's he?" Rab was coming down the ladder. "What's up?" he said sleepily. "The first of the tea ships, the Dartmouth, is entering the harbor. She'll be at Castle Island by nightfall." "So they dared send them?" "Yes." "And the first has come?" "Yes. God give us strength to resist. That tea cannot be allowed to land." When Johnny got back with Mr. Lorne, Rab had Mr. Adams's text in his hands, reading it as a printer reads, thinking first of spacing and capitals, not of the meaning. I can set that in no time. 200 copies? They'll be fairly dry by nightfall. Ah, Mr. Lorne, said Adams, shaking hands. Without you, printers, the cause of liberty would be lost forever. Without you, Mr. Lorne's voice shook with emotion, there would not have been any relief in liberty to lose. I will, as always, do anything, everything you wish. I got word before dawn. It's the Dartmouth, and she will be as far as Castle Island by nightfall. If that tea is landed, if that tax is paid, everything is lost. The selectmen will meet all day today, and I am calling a mass meeting for tomorrow. This is the placard I will put up. He read it from Rab's hands. He took it from Rab's hands and read. Friends, brethren, countrymen, the worst of plagues, the detested tea shipped for this port by the East India Company is now arrived in the harbor. The hour of destruction, of manly opposition to the machinations of tyranny, stares you in the face. Every friend to his country, to himself, and to posterity is now called upon to meet at Faneuil Hall at 9 o'clock this day. That, of course, is tomorrow, Monday, at which time the bells will ring to make united and successful resistance to this last, worst, and most destructive measure of administration. Boston, November 29th, 1773. Then he added quietly, up to the last moment, up to the 11th hour, we will beg the governor's permission for the ship's return to London with their cargo. We have 20 days. Johnny knew that by law, any cargo that was not unloaded within 20 days might be seized by the custom house and sold at auction. Mr. Lorne, needless to say, the observers will meet tonight. There are private decisions to be made before the mass meeting tomorrow at 9. Johnny pricked up his ears. Ever since he had come to Mr. Lorne's, and Rab said he might be trusted with anything, possibly with men's lives, he had now and then summoned the members of the Observers' Club. They were so close to treason they kept no list of members. Rab made Johnny memorize the 22 names. They met in Rab and Johnny's attic. Johnny, said Mr. Lorne, anxious and over-anxious to please Mr. Adams, start right out. No, sir, if you please. Noon will be better. That will give the members time to get home from church. And as usual, Johnny, make no stir. Simply say, Mr. So-and-so owes 8 shillings for his newspaper. Johnny nodded. That meant the meeting would be tonight at 8 o'clock. If he said £1 8 shillings, it would mean the next night at 8. £2 3 and 6 would mean the day after at 3:30. It gave him a feeling of excitement and pleasure to be even on the fringes of great, secret, dangerous events. Today he could not make his rounds on horseback. A constable might stop him and ask embarrassing questions. There was a law against riding out on Sunday for either business or pleasure.